So you can see here Spring Boot 2.x content. In fact, this should be the Spring Boot 3.x content. So we'll go with the Spring Boot 3.x. So we'll discuss initially the Spring Boot 2.x content, and then we will see the Spring Boot 3.x content. So let me make it as Spring Boot 2.x content, and then let's go with the Spring Boot 3.x content. Okay, however, welcome to Spring Boot microservices session, demo session 1. So in this session, of course, this is the session 1. So let us discuss about what are the course objectives and the prerequisite, duration of the course, and then how you can download the materials, where we can download the source code, and what we gonna do basically, meaning how you gonna learn basically the Spring Boot microservices very easily but in depth. So that is the objective of this course. I believe my voice is clear for you, right? Am I audible, guys? Can anyone please confirm? Am I audible? Is my voice is clear for you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It's
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Yes. So now let's see the first course objective, then course overview. In the course objective, let us see the course overview, prerequisite, downloading the source code, and then materials, and then the recorded videos. So first, let's see this course overview is first to learn Spring Boot, microservices architecture, and Spring Cloud, Docker. That's it. No Kubernetes, Spring Cloud, Docker. So to learn Spring Boot, microservices architecture, Spring Cloud, and Docker from very beginner to proficient. I mean to say advanced level. So you can learn definitely to an advanced level or proficient level. I can say advanced level. So at least you can perform proficient level in the interviews. So this is what the course objective. So basically to learn the Spring Boot microservices architecture, Spring Boot, and then microservices architecture, Spring Cloud, and Docker. So why we need to learn all these things, but we'll discuss. This is the course overview. Then prerequisite is what? Prerequisite is, if you know the CoreJava, especially JDK 8 plus, that is very good enough. Basically, this course requires the Spring Core and Spring Web MVC as well. Spring Core, Spring Web MVC, and before this, many of the Spring AOP concepts we're going to use while we're going to discuss the microservices architecture. At least CoreJava, Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC, these are all the prerequisite concepts. These are all prerequisite for you. But here, if you know only CoreJava, if you don't know Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC, you can happily join this course, because though you know the CoreJava, I'll explain the Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC from very scratch along with the material. I will also provide the material for this, and we'll discuss again from very beginning to advanced level in the Spring Core, Spring AOP, and then Spring Web MVC, because these three are important. I can say core thing for learning the Spring Boot. So before going to Spring Boot learning, we must have to learn these three. I believe most of you guys might know about this Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC. Again, I'll explain on the Spring 6.x. So on the Spring 6.x, you might have, most of you guys might know about the various versions of the Spring releases, and then these concepts you might have worked on, or maybe you might have learned on different versions. But let me again start the Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC from very scratch on the Spring 6.x, because Spring 6.x is now the version which is compatible for the Spring Boot 3.x. And CoreJava JDK 8 plus environment is JDK 8 plus knowledge or experience is required, but we really required the JDK 17 plus. We really required JDK 17 plus, but that's okay. If you know the JDK 8 plus concepts, that is fine. So what are the prerequisites for this? CoreJava, that means JDK 8 plus, and then the Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC. So in order to understand the Spring Core and all in CoreJava, what you need to know more is object creation process, and then the memory, how the memory is utilizing, memory utilization. So object creation, memory utilization, and then the threads processing, thread processing. In thread processing, you need to know about the concurrency. Concurrency is very important. So these three concepts are the core concepts again in CoreJava to understand the Spring Core container. And along with this, we also need to understand few concepts about the convention over configuration. Convention over configuration. We can say it as a C2C, and we also can say it as a convention over coding as well. Convention over coding, convention over configuration. This concept also you need to understand. So convention over coding, convention over configuration basically is also there in the Maven, but it is a software paradigm. So you need to now understand what is software paradigm, right? So you need to understand the paradigm versus the pattern versus the style. So these are all the concepts you need to understand. Again, from the CoreJava perspective, you need to have a sound experience or the knowledge on understanding the class versus entity, class versus entity. So these are all the prerequisite concepts to know before we go with the Spring Core and then Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC. Basically, why this Spring Boot came into the picture, the very important reason is what? Rapid application development, meaning faster development. So in order to do that faster development, something need to be pre-built, or automatically it should have to provide something which enables our development is very fast, right? So how the platform has been built. The Spring Boot internally contains what kind of platform? So how it is different from the regular object creation, right? So that depth we need to learn, so that when you learn in that depth Spring Core concepts, then Spring Boot, and going forward we're going to use the microservices patterns. Maybe we're going to use the anti-patterns. So understanding those concepts is very easy if you know the Spring Core in depth. But when you know Spring Core in depth, again, you need to understand these concepts. You need to have a sound knowledge or experience on these concepts. However, we will discuss about these things before starting the Spring Core 6.x. Okay, so this is the prerequisites. So after this prerequisites is completed, then we will start the Spring Boot. But before starting the Spring Boot, what is the duration and then what is the fee of this course? So duration and then the fee. These are also everybody need to know, right? So downloading the source code and then materials. So the source code you can download from the GitHub, I'll provide. And then materials you can download from the Google Classroom. So I'll provide you the access for the Google Classroom. So it is like this. So this is the Google Classroom. All the materials, whatever the discussions we're going to do, all the things we see here. See, free email domain validator, whatever we discuss. So all the materials you can see here: Docker material, Spring Cloud material. Of course, Spring Cloud material I was included as part of the microservices material, and then Spring Boot material. This material can be downloadable and also can be shareable. Okay, so materials can be downloadable and shareable. Then the recordings, the recorded videos, you will get these recorded videos on the same day when the class happened. Let's say now 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Let's say the class happened. Maybe you can expect this video in the next day by the 12 p.m. So the recorded videos will be uploaded to your drive, maybe your Gmail drive or whatever the storage mechanism you choose. So to that storage mechanism, this recorded videos will be uploaded. Then duration of this course is 75 days. In fact, the thought is to complete in 60 days only, but 15 days I'm keeping buffer for any of the reasons, maybe work busy or maybe classes will be postponed due to any of the circumstances. Then these 15 days will be buffer for us, but the original target is only 60 days. So fee is 8,000. Fee is 8,000 INR. If you are my previous students, or if you are the students of the DURGASOFT, if you want any, coupon codes or free discount codes, you can touch with the backend team. Probably you can have a discussion this with the backend team. But this is what is the course objective is. Here you're going to learn Spring Boot, microservices, Spring Cloud, and then Docker. And apart from this, meaning Spring Boot, microservices, Spring Cloud, Docker, along with these, I'll also teach the Maven and Gradle. Maven and then Gradle. Why I'm talking about this Maven explicitly here, you need to understand about the two things here. In Maven, you need to understand the bill of materials pattern, which is called as the POM. So you need to understand the bill of materials pattern. Bill of materials pattern. If you understand the bill of materials pattern, then you will understand the Spring Boot dependencies hierarchy. So Spring Boot, to understand the Spring Boot application dependencies hierarchy, first you need to know about this bill of materials. So which we're going to learn from this Maven. Most of you guys maybe know about the Maven, and most of you guys might not know about the Maven. But don't worry about it. So this Maven bill of materials we'll discuss. And Gradle. Nowadays, everyone in the sense, most of the projects are also trying to build on the Gradle. Gradle is super fast in the Maven. So it is an expectation that every developer at least have one build tool, but I'll also explain this Gradle, but not in regular sessions. One weekend workshop I'll conduct and then explain this Gradle. So the bill of materials concept, convention over configuration concept, whatever I discussed here, convention over configuration, bill of materials concept. These concepts are common for the Gradle and also for the Maven as well. Okay, so very, very important. These are all the prerequisites that everybody should have to know before starting the Spring Boot. So this is what the course objective. And going forward, we also see when we start this microservices architecture, you guys also have to know about the REST style, right? REST API design. So you guys have to know about the REST API design. So I'll explain about the REST API design, what are the design considerations, and know how we have to write the REST APIs, and how we have to expose the various formats of the data, and how we can consume the various formats of the data. So basically REST API design, and then the important things that need to take care when developing the REST API, all those things we'll discuss. So we'll also discuss the Spring REST. That means here Spring AOP, Spring WebMVC. Here we'll also see the Spring REST. We'll also see the Spring REST on 6.x. So these are all the prerequisites for the Spring REST is Spring WebMVC and then Spring REST. Again, these two we can implement using the Spring Boot. But before starting the Spring Boot, we need to understand the internals of the Spring WebMVC components. like how the dispatcher servlet will work, and how the various handlers are there, how the request data will be binded, how the response data will be given back. So all this internal flow and the concepts of the Spring Web MVC we should have to know. So this is what the prerequisite. However, I'll cover from here, meaning not entire core Java, but these concepts: object creation process, memory utilization, thread processing, convention over configuration, paradigm versus pattern versus style, class versus entity. So these concepts I'll explain, then I'll go for the Spring Core 6 statics. Okay, any questions for me from the course objective? Any questions for me from the course objective? Yeah.
Is there is there any live project going to be conducted in the part of this course?
Okay. Real-time project is a different concept because this is the concept-oriented. Spring Boot, microservices, Spring Cloud, Docker. The concepts you will learn here on one, we can say it as one monolithic application. So I can say this is what the application we're going to build using the time leaf. So I have to mention that also here. Time leaf, time leaf, and let me say time leaf. So what we will do here, we will implement this application using the Spring Boot and then the time leaf. Not all the modules, at least customer module, and then if possible, the category module. So one or two modules will implement it, because on this, we need to understand various things like how we can handle the validations, and then exception handling, exception translations, transactions, all the loggers, all the various concepts we need to understand on this project. So we'll build this vShopify project, vShopify platform project, using the Spring Web MVC and then time leaf as part of your Spring Boot learning process. Okay, but not the microservices. Of course, these application only we will drill down into the microservices down the line. But when it comes to a particular real-time Java real-time project, so there may be a lot of other cases will come, like infrastructure will come, where this project need to be hosted. Let's say AWS cloud, we're going to take there, and then we're going to configure the load balancers, API gateways, and NAT gateways, internet gateways. A lot of infrastructure is required there in the real-time applications. But here, I'm not going to go into that idea. So here I'm going to tell how we can implement a project using the Spring Boot microservices concepts that you're going to learn here. So concepts oriented, more stress on the concepts, in depth of the concepts, and that concepts will apply on this project. Whatever you can see, exactly this project, let us implement using the time leaf. So one module, I'll explain one or two modules, remaining modules, you guys can do parallelly along with me. Got it? Any questions? Any questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
Sir, are you covering in this topic Spring security and testing?
Yes. I'll go to the detailed of the content. Let me go one by one. Okay, definitely I'll cover. So yeah, let me write here. So we're gonna see Spring Security 6.x, Spring Security 6.x along with the JWT, along with the OAuth 2. So in Spring Security, we have three cases again. One is web application security, and API security. So when it comes to API security, we will use OAuth 2 plus JWT. For this one, let us implement OAuth 2 plus JWT, and also let us take the Keycloak server for, Keycloak is acting as an IDP server, which is already have an infrastructure built for this OAuth 2 plus JWT. So two things, we will implement it, and also we'll go through this Keycloak as well. So yes, Spring Security 6.x will be covered here. That is web application security and then API security. Both will be covered. Right? Any more questions?
Hi, sir.
Yeah, hi.
I don't have knowledge on Spring, but I'm free to learn Spring Boot, sir. Any problem, sir?
So if you can see here, that's what I'm telling. Only CoreJava is the prerequisite, whereas Spring Core I'll teach.
Okay.
From the very beginner to moderate level or proficient level, I'll teach the Spring Core.
Okay.
And not only Spring Core, Spring AOP, Spring WebMVC. So these concepts I'll explain, then only we'll start the Spring Boot.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's
Sir,
also
I have one doubt.
yeah. Go ahead,
Hello.
please. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir, for learning the microservices, do we need to learn about the RESTful web services also?
Compulsory. All the REST services, all the microservices are REST services, but not all the REST services are microservices. All the REST services are not microservices, but all microservices are REST services. So we must have to know about the REST API design before going to the microservices architecture implementation. Clear?
Okay, because
Hmm.
because I am already working as a developer, working on Spring Boot, but I don't have
Okay.
the knowledge of the microservices.
Okay.
That's why I'm joining this class.
Sure. So we're going to implement these microservices using the various microservices patterns. So first we're going to implement this Spring Boot monolithic application, and then we will drill down this application into the microservices using or by applying the various microservices patterns like Strangler pattern, DDD, domain-driven development, and there were various other microservices patterns which we will apply, and then we will convert this entire application into a microservices architecture application. And also I'll explain the React.js integration, not React.js full course, but React.js integration I'll explain. So when we see the API security and all, with this API security and all, how the APIs will be integrated with the React.js. So this is also we'll see. Fine. And how obviously the tools we can use the various other tools. The tools we can use are the JUnit for the unit testing, and then Marketo, JUnit, and then unit testing for the Marketo, and then we will use the Mark server. Mark server also we'll use, and we will use the HTTP entity, and then REST template for the integration testing. Then we will use the Jacaco for the code coverage. So these are the tools, however, we definitely will implement, because unit testing, in my opinion, unit testing is must and should. Without performing the unit test, if we go for the implementation of the API or maybe the functionality, if we don't perform the unit testing properly with all the negative scenarios, positive scenarios, maybe our functionality definitely not work as expected. It may break it somewhere or some point. So unit testing is very, very important. So we'll use the JUnit and then Marketo along with the Mark server. And this is for the unit testing. And for the integration testing, HTTP entity, REST template. And of course, we can use the web client as well. I forgot web client. So these are all the clients that we can use for integration testing. Then Jacaco is for the code coverage, and I'll also use the SonarLint for the vulnerability scanning. SonarLint for the vulnerability scanning. So meaning your code, how much your code is robust, or are you following the coding standards suggested by the JDK that you are using? Were there any viables or vulnerabilities? So all those things we can see in the SonarLint, and then we can fix them. So once the SonarLint will show the vulnerabilities and code faults like duplicate code or dead code, or maybe duplicate code or unreachable code, whatever it is. So when your code is not good, SonarLint will suggest you the changes to be done. Once you apply those changes, then do the unit testing. Once unit testing is passed, then go and then do your functional testing. So unit testing is always part of your application building. Okay, so unit testing is very, very important. Definitely, I will give huge priority to this unit testing. Okay, so and for the logging purpose, Spring Boot is, however, providing the log back, and we will use the SLF4J. Log back and then SLF4J we will use for the logging purpose. There is distributed logging and all also, that is I'm not going to cover, but log back SLF4J is what we're going to use for the logging purpose. And Postman tool, then Postman tool, and then the mobile XTEM tool we will use. This Postman tool we will use for the API testing, so for testing the API, and then mobile XTEM we will use because our final application we're going to deploy in our Docker machine. AWS in AWS we will take one Docker machine. That means AWS EC2 instance we will take, which we call it as a Docker machine. In that Docker machine, our final application is going to be run. So that in production mode, it will be run. So when I say production mode, we should have to be enabled in Spring Boot. So remember this concept. There is a concept called actuators. So I also forgot to add one more thing. When we enable it in the production, we need to have, application metrics, metrics as well as the application behavior. Basically, we need to capture the application logs, application behavior and all. So for that, there's a concept in Spring Boot called actuators. So that actuators we will enable, and also whether the application is always up and run or it is now down or up. In order to see them, to monitor the health of the application, we also will use the Spring Boot admin dashboard. So Spring Boot admin dashboard. So these concepts also I'll cover here. Okay, so seems to be a lot of concepts are covering, right? Spring Boot, REST API design, microservices architecture, Spring Cloud, Docker, then Maven bill of materials, Gradle, Timeleaf, Spring security. In Spring security, two things: web application security and then microservices security, that is API security. Then we'll also cover the Keycloak IDP, then Docker, then React.js integration. Then we'll also see the Spring Boot admin dashboard implementation to see the health check of the application when it deployed in our production servers. Okay, so yeah, what else? If any tools will come in the middle, definitely we'll learn them. Yeah, any questions?
Yeah, sir. Taking the opportunity to ask, sir, can we get a chance to learn Jdbc or JPA things?
JPA, yes, JPA we will use here. So yeah, we'll use the Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA we'll use. So we'll use the Spring Data JPA because this application need to be stored the data into the backend DB. So entity conversions and all we'll see. So Spring Data JPA we will use. And also the database we'll use the MySQL and MongoDB. So I'll explain how the Mongo repositories will be written and then how the MySQL, meaning the data JPA is required for this RDBMS databases, but data JPA is not required for this MongoDB, meaning NoSQL databases. So in order to have the difference to you, I'll explain MySQL database, meaning connectivity with the MySQL database, and also the connectivity with the NoSQL database, that is the MongoDB. Okay, someone is, yeah, go ahead, please.
Sir, just a small doubt. The project just you showed us it is built in React or it is something else?
No,
just for curiosity.
These are right now, these are just wireframes, static pages, but we have to build it. We have to build it using the Timeleaf, using the Spring Boot. And when we go to microservices architecture, then the same application has to build using the React.js. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Fine. As someone is asking, circuit breaker will be covered. Circuit breaker gone away. The circuit breaker era gone. Now, of course, circuit breaker is definitely required now, but not with the Hystrix. Circuit breaker is there with the resilience 4J. So what I mean to say is, microservices architecture, when we'll discuss the microservices patterns. In microservices patterns, we'll discuss the resilience 4J patterns. We'll discuss the resilience 4J pattern. What I mean to say is circuit breaker, meaning Hystrix is not going to be used because Hystrix is outdated. So what we're going to use is in place of the Hystrix and all, not in place of Hystrix, but we're going to use the resilience 4J. So resilience 4J circuit breaker we will use, not Spring Cloud provided circuit breaker. It is resilience 4J circuit breaker we will use. Not only circuit breaker, we're going to use the rate limiter as well. We're going to use the rate limit, circuit breaker, and then we're going to use the bulkhead. So these are the resilience 4J patterns we're going to use in our microservices. When we migrate to microservices, then I'll explain about these patterns. I believe microservices patterns, you can give me a moment. I think I can showcase you the one more classroom which have a detailed documents about these microservices patterns. You can see here. Yeah, so these many services we have resilience 4J. In resilience 4J, what we're going to cover? In resilience 4J, we're going to cover the circuit breaker of resilience 4J, offering by the resilience 4J, and then the rate limit, circuit breaker pattern. Then we're going to discuss the rate limiter, and we're going to discuss the retry pattern. This is very, very important. Retry pattern is very, very important. So resiliency meaning retry pattern, and then the rate limiting, and then the bulkhead, all this will come. But retry will, before retry, we also have the circuit breaker pattern. So I'll explain when time comes, but I just would like to showcase you what we're going to learn here. So fallback rate limiter pattern, and then finally the bulkhead pattern. So these are all the things we're going to see in the resilience 4J patterns. Any more questions?
Sir, Naveen here.
Yeah, hi Naveen.
Sir, you are said that you will cover the prerequisites also. So how many days will be sufficient to cover the prerequisites, Spring AOP,
Okay.
Core and all?
Okay, so my expectation is earlier when I taken the Spring Core itself, have taken for me 15 to 20 days. 15 to 20 days. 15 to 20 days were taken for Spring Core only. This time, what we will do is let us spend in weekends as well. Let us take the longer sessions, and then if we can complete this Spring Core by 15 days, then the Spring AOP we can complete within just 3 to 5 days. Then Spring Web MVC we can complete again in just 3 to 5 days. Not in depth of the Spring Web MVC, because again in depth about the Spring Web MVC we can see in Spring Boot, but the internal mechanism of Spring Web MVC, how it will work and all, we need to know. So in 3 to 5 days, I'll give you the Spring Web MVC internal flow, internal components and all, and then we will build a simple application. So then Spring REST, we will discuss when the microservices will start. So my expectation is 15 days to 25 days we'll spend on this, this prerequisite. Then you say, you may ask me a question now. So 25 days will be go for this prerequisite only. Then we have the around 50 days in our hand, right? So 50 days we can utilize properly to complete the Spring Boot, and because when the base is strong, then it won't take much time for us in Spring Boot, because you can easily understand what is happening in the Spring Boot. It's more about the fine-grained architecture on the Spring Web MVC or Spring Core concepts what you have learned. So we can 50 days is more than enough for us to complete the all these things. Of course, we can also spend some time in the weekends as well, like longer sessions.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, will Apache Kafka covered under the session?
No, Apache Kafka is not covering here. Apache Kafka is a separate course. What I will do is, if you guys are interested for the Apache Kafka, I'll allow you for the Apache Kafka course, maybe with the nominal fee or maybe the free of cost. I'll decides maybe the situation. It mostly with the nominal fee or mostly with the free of cost, because Apache Kafka is itself is a minimum 1 month concept, minimum 1 month. It is a 30 days course. I can give the overview like Apache, what is Apache Kafka and all, that doesn't sufficient what I mean. So whatever you learn properly. So not just, tasting the things and then leaving. No, we should have to know how it will also cook. So we should have to know the cooking process of it, not only, doing the tasting. So that is what my motto. My major focus is covering in-depth and internals of Spring Boot, microservices, Spring Cloud, and then Docker to make them as a cloud native applications. That is what my primary motto here. Once you know all these concepts and in-depth of it, then on top of it, you can add whatever you want. Kafka you can add, Auxon server you can add, CQRS you can add, whatever event-driven systems you can add. You can add the DynamoDB, or you can deploy it in the AWS Lambda, whatever you want to add, you can add it. But the base is very important. So that is what my motto. So maybe few folks might have the, honestly speaking, if you have already experience on Spring Boot or already experience on the knowledge on the Spring Boot, maybe you guys are not interested to attend, but there were few folks, they dedicatedly came here to learn Spring Boot only, right? They came here for the Spring Boot microservices architecture learning. So my focus is more on to giving the in-depth about the Spring Boot microservices architecture. Got it?
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Sir, one more thing. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Sir, what are the projects you are going to conduct in this session or in this course? So can we use this in our resume or it just for the overview?
Okay. One thing I would like to tell is this 100% you can showcase in your resume. But the problem here is maybe conflict will come. For example, let us assume 50 or 60 members are attending this course. Unknowingly, you also putting this project and some other also putting this project, the same title, same concept, same modules and all. So maybe that will come some conflict. But overall, domain wise, this is the retail e-commerce domain. Domain wise, you will get the knowledge here. So this domain experience you can use. So maybe you can put Shopify, someone will put Shopify, someone will put, the Amazon Mark or Amazon clone, whatever it is. The concept here is the retail e-commerce. The domain concept is very important. So domain experience and the domain knowledge you will get it here. So on top of it, whatever the title you can give and whatever the content you can showcase, because this domain content, the retail e-commerce domain contains few functionalities. Those are the functionalities what we're going to implement here. So again, what I'm explaining here is I'm going to implement the customers module and then the categories module only. But you guys have to focus on the products and then orders as well. So here payments and then the shipment, delivery, those are all not covering, because my intention is not on to the Java real-time project. We have the time constraints as well, right? So my focus is the giving the Spring Boot and microservices content in depth, and that too on one simple project implementation. But when we go to the Java real-time project implementations, lot more modules will come here and lot more functionality will be added here, and also lot more infrastructures will be added here. That is the difference. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, do you cover this Tomcat deployments, web services?
Those will be covered. I thought of showcasing the content actually, but I have not went into the content. So once I go to the content, you can see, what are all the containers it is supporting, meaning what are all the deployment under Tomcat and external Tomcat deployment or external JBoss deployment. All those things will cover. So these are all what, default things we need to learn. So you no need to be focused more on it. Definitely I'll cover. See this, deploying the applications in application servers like Tomcat and then JBoss. Though the Spring Boot is giving the Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, but it is not application server. It is just a web server. It is just a thread. Just a thread it is. It's just a process, not even thread. It's a process. Of course, process is having many more threads inside in it, but it's a process. But here separately, I have added a content deploying the applications in application servers, that is Tomcat and then JBoss, right? So that means what? There is something that we need to take care when we target it to deploying the external servers. That is what we're going to discuss here, right? Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Sir, can we get this content list?
Yeah. I think it is already uploaded in the DURGASOFT course content courses list, I believe. Let me check. If not, I'll ask the team to share this content with all of you guys. Maybe you guys, how many members are attended? So for all those members, this course content you will get. So just let me check it. I'm just double checking. If it is not there, then I'll ask them to share. Yeah, seems to be it is not here. Course content. Just let me check. Yeah. Oh no, this is not my content. This is not my content. I'll ask the team to share the content. Okay. Right. Now
Sir,
let's. Yeah.
So Navin,
Sir.
here, one small question.
Yeah,
Sir,
Navin.
from Spring Boot, I understand is for rapidly building our Spring applications, correct, sir?
Correct.
So similarly, what is microservices in a 1 or 2 lines? If anyone asks me, what should I answer, sir?
Okay, maybe this is little early to discuss, but the point is Spring Boot application, using Spring Boot, we can build the monolithic applications which may prone for single point of failures. Again, understanding the concept of monolith, single point failures is maybe little early here, but in a single sentence, to address the single point failures in the monolithic applications implemented using the Spring Boot, we go for the microservices architecture. That is in a single sentence.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. This is Rakshana here.
Yeah. Hi, Rakshana.
Actually, the thing is, I have never worked with the API, REST API at real-time projects. So is that, can I get a clarity on APIs in this course?
100%, because the intention of it is what the microservices proficient level, expert level. I need to make you to be at expert level or proficient level in microservices architecture. So definitely there is a lot of things we need to take care in the REST API design. For example, observability will come, and then there's a concept called observability, and then the retry patterns, meaning the fallback mechanisms, retry, exception handling, unit testing, meaning if it is a REST API, monetization, how we can do it, monetization, and how we can send the exception messages, how we can handle the exception messages. So definitely all these things are required to know. First of all, how to write the REST API. We have some rules provided by this REST API, guidelines given by the REST API. REST API, Java API for XML web services, and then the JOX RS, Java API for XML RESTful services. That has been given various rules, actually, guidelines given. So the JOX RS guidelines we will study, and then on top of the JOX RS guidelines, how the REST Spring REST has been built, we will see, and what are the other frameworks for available in the market also we'll see. What I mean to say is, in depth of the REST API concepts is what we're going to see here. So like logging, monitoring, resiliency, retry, fallback, monetization, security. So these are all the important concepts for any API. Okay. So, and documentation, finally, documentation. So what is it? REST API documentation, REST API security, REST API monetization, REST API rate limiting, REST API bulk heading, REST API circuit breaker, REST API fallback, REST API retry, right? So these are all the important concepts. And REST API, how we can design it, basically. So what are the rules that we have to follow, steps we need to follow? Let's say, usually, I'm just giving an example, usually in order to build some students data, in order to get some students data, if you write get students, usually in interviews, when I conduct the interviews, if I'll ask the people to write the REST API, they'll write like this. So create student, get students, get all students. Just an example I'm mentioning here. So like this, they will write. So this is meaning REST API REST API or the REST API framework, whatever we are using, it doesn't throw any error. This would work, but conceptually or guidelines wise, rules wise, this is incorrect. Then what to be correct? How we have to design? How your API should be proper? So that's what we're gonna learn. Okay. So
one more thing.
Hmm.
Actually, the project you have made, are you going to deploy it on the AWS?
correct. See this AWS EC2 as a Docker image, we're gonna run this project. So Docker we will set up in AWS EC2 machine. Then we're gonna deploy our application there in the Docker
So
machine.
we are going to get the access of AWS.
No, everybody has to build everybody has to create their own AWS free tier account.
Okay.
You can't access my EC2 instance or my AWS account. Okay, I'll explain how to create AWS account, free sign up, how we can use it and all. I'll explain. Don't worry about it. The production, when we go to the production setup and all, I'll explain. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
No need to worry here much more, but we need to, our major focus is on these core concepts. So these concepts are our major focus. Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, so Abhishek here actually.
Yeah, Abhishek.
So my point is like, so do you have any plan to cover in-memory database as well?
Obviously, in-memory database, okay, I'll do one thing. Let me go ahead and then cover the Spring Boot content so that you guys will get the clarity, because whatever I have planned in my content, those are most of the questions you guys are asking that only. So better let me showcase you the content. Okay, so course objective, I believe everybody is clear with the course objective. Again, I'm telling the duration is 75 days and then the fee is 8,000 INR. Recordings will be provided to your drive, and then you can download the source code from the GitHub, and you can download the material also from the Google Classroom. But the recordings you can't download, you can't share. Whereas the material you can download, you can share. Okay, so the next is what? Let's go to the Spring Boot content. Here you can see Spring Boot content as 2.x. So first I will go with the 2.x content. Then I'll go with the 3.x content. Then the differences you can see, the changes happened since 2.x to 3.x, you can easily understand. So in 2.x, Spring Boot 2.x, what we will see? First, we'll see what is Spring Boot, overview of Spring Boot, why we should have to go for Spring Boot, as we already have the eminent and then rich feature Spring Web MVC or Spring. Why the Spring Boot came on top of the Spring, right? So that is what we need to understand. Then features of the Spring Boot. So once you understand this overview, then the features of Spring Boot, one interview question will be covered here. Then how many ways we can create a Spring Boot project is we will understand. Then once we create the Spring Boot project, then we will understand the concepts of the Spring Boot application, components of the Spring Boot application. So we're going to create a Spring Boot application, right? When we create a Spring Boot application, Spring Boot by default will gives us few components. So what are those components? We'll study. pom.xml file we will study. Again, in order to understand this POM file, here we already have done with the discussion of the bill of materials pattern, and also we had done the discussion of convention over configuration. So convention over configuration and then bill of materials. As these both concepts were completed, then you guys can easily understand this pom.xml file, the pom.xml file, because the same concepts are also used by the Spring Boot guys, and then they have given the pom.xml file. Then we will see the concept of the Spring Boot starters. Then understanding the application.java, application.properties, application test.java. So these are all the Spring Boot components. For a simple Spring Boot application, we can see these components. Then here also we will understand the Spring Boot application internals, packaging internals, and here we will also understand the fat jar or var versus lightweight jar or var. So we'll understand the internals of the Spring Boot application. This concept will take around 1 week to understand. It will take 1 week of our sessions. It will take to understand the internals of the Spring Boot. Okay, there were a lot of things will come in the Spring Boot internal. When we debug the application internally, lot of concepts, lot of things will come. Most of the things we discuss here only in the Spring Core we'll discuss, and then most of the things we are discussing here: object creation process, memory utilization, thread processing. So these concepts we are discussing, and then these concepts also we discuss in the Spring Core and then the prerequisite course. Then you can easily understand this Spring Boot internal application, Spring Boot application packaging, and then the Spring Boot internal flow. You can easily understand. Then there is an important concept called Spring Boot auto configuration, which is heart of your Spring Boot. Without this concept, there is no meaning for Spring Boot. Of course, this concept by default Spring Boot is using this auto configuration concept with some conditionals. So here what we will do is, here we will take the advantage of the conditionally loading the Spring Beans, meaning conditionally creating the objects is what we're going to learn here in the Spring Core. Again, the same concept we will use here. So how the Spring Boot auto configuration will work. In order to understand this one, we have to understand very well how the objects will be created in Spring Core container. Then we can easily understand this auto configuration, which is the core feature of the Spring Boot and heart of the Spring Boot, I can say. Without this auto configuration, I think there is no meaning for Spring Boot, and Spring Boot application never be there with this auto configuration. So auto configuration is there. So enabling and then disabling the Spring Boot auto configuration. This is an interview question actually. We will discuss. By default, the Spring Boot auto configuration will be disabled. So we need to enable it. To enable it, we will use this conventional configuration approach. So maybe my words or whatever I'm talking may be little new for you, but this is a fact. So maybe whenever you hear the other faculties demos and all, maybe they might not have used this much of complex terminology, but the reality is what? This is what you have to learn, not the CRUD operations or not hello world or bye bye world. No. So we have to know in depth of these concepts. That is the reality. Then only you can survive in the real time, meaning in the real industry. However, we'll also see the alternating the Spring Boot configurations, meaning Spring Boot by default is coming up with the application.properties file, right? So how we can change this application.properties, meaning what are the default properties we're going to get, and then how we can change the Spring Boot default configurations, overriding the default configuration values, externalizing the property file. So one moment, yeah, externalizing the property files, then so one moment. Yeah, creating the custom configuration properties, reading the custom configuration, changing the default embedded server. Here, default embedded server is the Tomcat. So we can change it to Undertow, or we can change it to one more built-in server. 3 servers are there: Jetty, Undertow, and then Tomcat. Then how we can deploy the Spring Boot application in the external servers like Tomcat and then the JBoss application servers. So all these things we'll discuss in this alternating the Spring Boot configuration. Then we'll go for the connection pooling, Hikari CP connection pooling. Earlier in Spring Boot 1.x, Tomcat connection pooling was there by default. But from the Spring Boot 2.x, Hikari CP connection pooling was taken as the by default. Why the Hikari CP connection pooling has been taken? First of all, what is connection pooling? Very, 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 very important. Very important. Definitely, when you go and then deploy your applications in the real time servers may be using containers, or maybe using the lambdas, or maybe using any other mechanism. Once in a while, you may see the performance problems. So how effectively we have to configure this connection pooling, because Spring Boot by default giving us the 10 connection objects. So, but how we can increase the connections, meaning how we can make the application to be have the the more connections are available to connect with the DB and then get the data, because in real time DB will be somewhere else. DB will be somewhere else, and then application will be somewhere else, and then both will be connected over the network, right? So how this connection pooling will be very, very, very important, very, very important. Hickory CP connection pooling. Then we will see the concept of profiles. Again, this concept is also very important. Every concept will gives you one interview question for sure. In this profiles concept, we'll understand what is profile. So here, Marvin, we will see the bill of materials, right? So similarly, we also will see the Marvin profiles concept. So Marvin is already have the profiles concept. Then why the Spring Boot is also giving the concept of the profiles. So what is the differences between the Marvin profiles and then the Spring Boot profiles? Though the Spring Boot is created, or though the Spring Boot is using Maven as a build tool, then why separately the Maven is Spring Boot is also came up with the concept of profiles? So we need to understand that. So the difference between the Maven profiles and then the Spring Boot profiles is very, very important to understand. So here see Maven profiles in traditional web applications, how there will be, and then conditionally creating the beans with profiles, then Spring Boot profiles using the multiple property file. Here we will give the introduction to the YAML files. So here I'll explain what is YAML file, how we have to write the YAML files, what is the syntax of the YAML file. So I'll provide a documentation, and also I'll explain the YAML. How the YAML file is, how to write the YAML files, what is the semantics, syntax and then semantics of the YAML files. So those we will see. Then we'll go with the data access layer. So what I mean to say is, let me draw one simple diagram. Just give me a moment. Let me draw one simple diagram. So we're gonna build, we're gonna build this Spring Boot application. So let's say this is what I would like to explain. So maybe let me copy this and then paste it here. Yes, see this. So this is a Spring Boot application, right? Maybe, it is running in one machine, and then it may connect to the database, which is running in the another machine or another server, or maybe on the cloud, right? So when these are all connected over the network, the important thing is what? Network availability. So when network availability is not there, then the connectivity will be broken. So how to handle such a network connectivities, how we have to maintain the connection alive, or how we can check the connections during the query performance, or query is executing, or before execution of the query. All those things we will see here. So what I mean to say is, to connect to this database from the Spring Boot application, we require the data source. So that data source we can get using this JPA. So implementing the data access layer. So in this application, again, the Spring Boot application will have the various layers. So this is the, we'll have this minimum 3 layers, because it is an entire architecture. I'll explain whatever it is later in time, what is entire architecture and all. So this is the DAO layer, and this is the service or business layer, and this is the controller or resource layer. So 3 layers we will have. So this layer is responsible for the database connectivity. So here, database connectivity logics we need to write in this DAO layer. Again, I'll explain in depth of it later in time, meaning when we are moving ahead. So DAO layer, we will write the database access logics and all with the particular database. So let's say this is the database. So maybe database is in some other server or maybe on the same server where the application is deploying. But so DAO layer is, we can also call it as a JPA layer. So DAO layer or JPA layer is what we need to implement to establish the connection with the DB. So this is what we're going to implement first. So that's what you can see, implementing the data access layer using the Spring Data JPA and then using the Hibernate. Of course, Data JPA will use Hibernate as its underlying, ORM. Again, how the Data JPA is using Hibernate internally as its ORM, we'll discuss when time comes. But Hibernate is using as an ORM by this Data JPA. So what is ORM and then how the Hibernate will be, what is the Hibernate components, what is its architecture, we'll discuss when time comes. So we will build this DAO layer with the Data JPA and which will connect to this database. So once this layer is implemented, we'll test this layer, we'll write the unit test cases with the JUnit Marketo, and we'll also write the, we'll also check the test code coverage using the Jacaco, right? So once the unit testing is completed here, then we'll go to the services or business layer. So in implementing the services layer or business layer, so very important is what? Transactions. So very important is transactions. So how the transactions will be implemented? What is transaction? How the transaction management is in Spring. We need to understand the pessimistic logs, optimistic logs, and the transaction concept, behavioral of the transaction management, transaction propagation. So there were 4 interfaces. We need to understand 4 interfaces, how they will work and all. So what I mean to say is transaction management in Spring and transaction management in Spring Boot, both we will discuss here and then implement the transactions in our service layer. So here we will implement the transactions. Then coming to the controller layer, we'll discuss about the, of course, not only transactions here, we'll also write the custom exceptions, because database exceptions will be thrown, database exceptions will be converted to, JPA Spring exceptions. That Spring exceptions, again, we need to convert here our custom exceptions. Custom exceptions we need to handle in our controller layer. So here, transactions, exception handling will be covered here. Of course, here, data JPA, Hibernate will be covered here. So logging, everywhere we will use the logging. So separately, I don't need to mention about it, but unit testing, data JPA, Hibernate, logging will be covered here. Then coming to here, logging, transaction, exception handling, unit testing. So unit testing we'll do, and then the integration testing we will do. So here we will test the service components. Of course, here no unit testing will come. Actually, everything here is integration testing only. So once we test the service, then the service should have to test DAO as well. So code coverage is very, very important here. So we'll use the unit testing with Marketo, and then we'll use the mock server for that. And then we will also use the Jacaco plugin here to do the code coverage, and we'll use the Sonar lint, in fact, to address any vulnerabilities and all, to check the code quality and all. Then we'll go to the controller layer or resource layer. So in controller layer, we'll implement the REST API and then the web application, both using the Spring Boot, both we will implement REST API and then the web application. So again, when it goes to API versioning, content negotiation, there are some other concepts of the API related concepts. I separately will mention in a separate content. So building the Spring WebMVC controller components using Spring Boot, validations, data binding, internal initialization, exception handling, exception translators, internal flow. So all these things we'll discuss in this controller layer. That means in the controller layer, we will write the data handling, meaning data bindings, request handling, and then response handling logics we'll write here. So once this is completed, then we can say this application is done. So this is what that application, let me showcase you. So this is what that application. Okay, so this application, first we'll start from this DAO layer, then we'll go to service layer, then we'll go to the controller layer. I think it's too late for you guys. 10, 11. I'm so sorry. Rest of the concepts we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay. So almost we are at the end of the discussion of this content, and Spring Boot 3.x content also there that I'll let us start discussing tomorrow. So we completed till here, then we'll discuss from here to the Spring Boot 3.x content and then microservices content. So all those things we'll discuss. Then we will start the understanding the little CoreJava concepts, object creation process, memory utilization, and all thread processing in coming demos. That's all from my side for today. Any questions for me?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, myself, Aman Singh.
Yeah, hi, Aman. Go ahead.
Sir, I have only the concept of Java 1.7 and idea of Jdbc servlet. Nowadays, I'm working on JSP.
Okay.
So I have one doubt, sir. Can I continue this course, because all the terminology here using by you are very new for me.
100% are absolutely true. That is very new for you.
Yeah.
So what I mean to say is, if you know the core Java, that may be the JDK 7 or whatever, but JDK 8 is preferable. I prefer JDK 8 because going forward, we're going to write the coding, right? When we do the live coding, we will use the JDK 8 features. So JDK 8 is must and should, but of course that you can also go through some tutorials or whatever it is, but JDK 8 is compulsory. Once you have the Java background, then you can attend Spring Core and all. I'll take care. And luckily, you also know about the request handling, session management, and all using Servlet. So that is very good enough. You can attend.
Will it create any problems if I have not the knowledge of Java JDK 1.8?
Not, but it is better because we're going to use JDK 1.8 features while writing the code. For example, we're going to use the streams, we're going to use the filters, we're going to use predicates, functions, consumers, right? So these are all the concepts we're going to use.
Excuse me, sir.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead, Nitin, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to tell you some. There is Durga sir, they already covered the topics in Java. So there is a 10-hour session. You can go through that. You will get the very much clarity about the JDK 1.8.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Okay. So just go through them. Obviously, Durga sir material is also very popular, right? So the CoreJava IST material. So
I learn only from that. That's why I'm telling you.
That's true. So, but however, we're going to use the CoreJava, JDK 1.8 concepts going forward in the code. So while doing the live coding, we're going to use them. So it is better because interviewers also, most of the interviewers are asking the Java 8 features. So it is better. You can go through it. Fine.
Sir.
Yeah. Any more questions for me, guys?
Sir, one more last question. What is it daily? How many hours we will take this session? 1 hour, 2 hours?
Okay. So daily 1 hour, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. because after 10 p.m. it is too hard to digest, and people are maybe tired with the day and all. But I'll spend most of the time in weekends. So every day 1 hour session. Whereas in the weekends we can take this session little bit early, like maybe 7 p.m. or maybe 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Like that, we'll spend more time in the weekends.
Sir, do we get the certification for the same?
Certification meaning, DurgaSoft will gives you the course completion certificate. They will give one certificate as the course is completed. Yes, they will give.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Hi, Narsi. Amol here.
Hey, Amol.
So, are you covering Spring Boot Cloud here?
Spring Cloud, yes, Spring Cloud I'm covering. Yeah,
So
since okay. What are the concepts of it? You want to know what are the concepts I'm going to cover in Spring Cloud?
Yes, sir. I would like to know.
Just give me a day because I'll showcase the course content of the Spring Cloud as well. But all the concepts like config server, registry, API gateway, and then we're going to use the these are all the three major we'll take, and then we'll use the Fiend client. And of course, Ribbon is now default, came up with this Fiend client. So Ribbon not explicitly we are not going to use. Again, the resilience 4J is giving the circuit breaker and other resilience things. So we are also not going to touch it. But especially this 5 concepts of the Spring Cloud, we're gonna look here, like config server, registry, gateway, API gateway, and then Fiend client. So these 4 concepts, along with the Spring Cloud streams. There is a Spring Cloud stream concept as well. So that Spring Cloud stream also I'll explain.
Okay, history breaker also considered.
Which one?
History breaker.
Hystrix is it is now what is that? Shade out. Hystrix is not support. Support is not there.
Oh,
in the
okay.
latest Spring Cloud, Hystrix support is not there. It is already removed. So because Hystrix is a component, the Spring Cloud guys borrowed from the Netflix. So what they did now, they have completely removed the Hystrix support and then asking us to go with the resilience 4J patterns. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more thing, that the project you are covering here. So we are applying Spring Cloud with.
Correct. All these things: Spring Boot, microservices, Spring Cloud, Docker, all these things. Meaning, stages wise we'll do. First, we'll implement the Spring Boot application. Then we'll migrate them to the microservices. Then to maintain these microservices, we need an ecosystem. That ecosystem we will build using the Spring Cloud. Then finally, the entire solution will Dockerize to run it as a cloud native solution.
Okay.
Got it? Yeah.
And one more thing. So shall I go parallel with a project batch? Or is it okay? I'm not pretty much covered with topics, but just a few things. So is it good?
It is good. It is good. If the time is there, then it is always good practice. Because parallelly both the things will be completed, then you will get much clarity by the end. Because for both the courses, the time duration is same, 75 days.
It's not good idea to talk about the project batch. Just I just want to know the domain you are covering in a project batch.
Same one. Retail,
same
retail. Yeah, whatever we are discussing here, the same I'm covering there.
So that will be full-fledged.
Full-fledged. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, folks. Thank you so much. It is 10:20. Yeah.
Sir, 75 lecture is sufficient for covering this courses.
Obviously, here few lectures. In that 75 lectures, few lectures are longer sessions, not 1 hour. Longer sessions, maybe 3 hours, 3 hours on Saturday and Sunday, like 3 hours on Saturday, 3 hours on Sunday. So for example, Spring Security is there. Then 6 hours is very good enough to understand the web application security, and then Spring Security Framework. Then one more 3 to 4 hours are required to understand this API security. So around 12 hours to 13 hours are required to complete the Spring Security. So those hours will accommodate, we'll spend in the weekends. Got it?
Narsi, I have one more question. Same, each session, are we covering a POC or directly applying to the project?
Directly applying to the project. So first, okay, the style of implementation is we have the wireframes now. Okay, so first what we will do is we'll first complete these concepts on a simple POC, simple application. So till here we'll complete the concepts. Even till here. What I meant to say. Yeah, till here we will do it with a simple application, simple POC. Then what we'll do is we'll create a Spring Boot web application with a time leaf. Our real time will come now. Real application will come now. Then time leaf will be, meaning that Spring Boot application need to be integrated with the database and then the service layer transactions and then the controller layer. So this part will be completed. So once after this is completed, then we'll go with this profiles concept. on the same project. Then we will apply this connection pooling on the same project. And then we will apply this testing, unit testing, integration testing, logging, actuators and all. So finally, we'll be come out with one full-fledged application. Of course, not full-fledged, but at least 2 modules or 3 modules will be completed end to end with the security and all. So that is the plan, basically. Got it right?
Yeah, got it. But I just want to know that it will be very understanding if first come with POC, each concept very small, not time consuming.
Correct.
And
correct.
then if you directly apply on that project you are covering in this course.
Okay, you mean to say rather going to the POC, we can directly go to the project, right? That's what you are saying.
No. First of all, small means uses of this concept in POC.
Correct.
Then we can directly apply to the project.
Correct. Exactly. That is what the plan. That is exactly the plan I have. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So someone is asking, Devi, please.
Abhishek, actually. Yeah, so I just wanted to know, like, once this course gets completed, like, is there any sort of certification we can go for? Any industry recognized certification?
Spring certifications, but very rare. Very rare people are there on the Spring certifications. Very rare. People are very rare. So we can go with the Spring certifications. Spring Boot is also offering the certifications and all, but no one is asking that. I in my opinion, that is time wasting, because while the time you spend on the Spring certification or Spring Boot certification, you can spend that time on learning the event-driven systems like Kafka streamings and all. The industry is required the microservices management techniques. Right now, still the industry is lagging with the applications of the microservices management. So where the industries are expecting more from that area. For example, Kafka is there. It is very good for the streaming and then solving this event-driven mechanism, but it is very hard to manage it with the containerization technology. Very hard to scale it. You spend your time that areas. Got my point, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those will help you. Those will, spike your career. But the certifications and all, no one will care about it, at least in my opinion.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so access to videos duration is 2 times. For example, we completed the videos in 75 days. We completed the course. The next 75 days, the videos will be available. And Devi, please send me classroom notes link, sir. So Devi, I will send the classroom notes link once after the enrolling process is completed. So after these demos and then the enrolling process is done, then I will add you guys to the classroom, Google Classroom. Fine. Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's too late. Maybe you guys also might tired with the day of your work and all. However, thank you so much for providing me an opportunity to present my content to you. Thanks a lot for that. And then hopefully see you tomorrow as well with the further concepts and further content understanding. Thanks a lot and see you tomorrow.
Thank
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.